Buenos días. Hoy vamos a trabajar con 6.3 y 6.4, the preterite tense of regular verbs and the demonstrative adjectives and pronouns. If you're using your Vista book, we're going to be on, let's see, it's page 206 for the preterite tense and page 210 for the demonstrative adjectives. And it looks like I'm the only one here today, which is fine. Maybe someone will show up a little later. But first we're going to start with the preterite tense. Let me get these slides to pull up real quick. Let's see. Okay, basically what you need to know is that everything you learned in Spanish 1 was the present tense. It was talking about things that are happening right now. And in Spanish, to talk about things that have happened in the past, there's two past tenses, either the preterite tense or the imperfect. And the one we're going to look at today is the preterite tense, and it's used to express actions or states that are completed in the past. And you'll understand more later when we work with the imperfect tense about how the two are different. But for now, we're just going to be working with the preterite tense. Okay, the way you conjugate a verb in the preterite tense is the same as the way you do it in the present tense. The first thing you have to do is take off either the AR, the ER, or the IR off the end of the verb infinitive form, and then add your preterite endings. And the preterite endings here are not standing out as much as I had meant for them to, but they're a little bit darker. If you want to repeat after me at home, the AR verbs, the endings are a, aste, o, amos, astes, aron. A, aste, o, amos, aron. For your ER and your IR verbs, they're exactly the same as each other. So they're iste, io, imos, ieron. Otra vez, iste, io, imos, ieron. And those are your preterite verb endings for regular verbs, verbs that follow the rules. And as you all probably caught on in Spanish 1, there are lots and lots and lots of verbs that are regular, but we tend to focus in on the ones that aren't regular so you'll know what to do with those. So the rest of this presentation is talking about the preterite tense, but some of the things that are a little bit special you might want to remember about them. Let's see. This is just going through pointing some things out that we just looked at. The yo, usted, leia forms of all three conjugations have written accents on the last syllable to show that it is stressed. And so far when you've been working with verbs, you haven't had accent marks on them. So just be aware that here you do, and as you've all caught on the in linea side, it's considered incorrect if you don't have it. So be sure that you put the accent mark where you mean for it to go. Let's see, and with the second one, that's what we already were talking about, that the ER and IR verbs are conjugated exactly alike. Let's see. This is something that students tend to notice. Your present tense ending and your preterite tense endings for the nosotros form are exactly the same for the AR and the IR, because with the ER it would have been EMOS in the present tense, so that one is a little bit different. And the only way you're going to know the difference is just from the context of the sentence. So if you have a word like last night, last week, yesterday, you'll know that that's referring to the preterite. And if it's just saying usually we do something, then that's probably going to be the present tense. Not rocket science, but the context will help you figure it out. Okay. If you will remember in Spanish 1, you learned all about some verbs that were called stem-changing verbs. And in the present tense, some of them changed from E to I, or from E to IE, or from O to UE. The one that students tend to remember the most is the verb dormir, and it ends up being duermo. So with that, you've got in the preterite, you don't have to worry about AR and ER verbs because they do not stem change in the preterite, which is really cool. So it'll be just their regular old verb. Cerrar, for example, changed from E to IE in the present tense. This column right here shows you the present tense. And in the preterite, it's not going to stem change. You'll just use the CERR and then the O with the accent mark as the ending for that third person singular. La tienda cerró a las 6. And similarly, for any ER or AR verb that you had that was a stem changer in the present tense, it will not stem change in the preterite. And Grant, I see you're here. How are you doing, Grant?
Very good, thank you. Sorry for being late.
Oh, no, you're fine. I'm just glad you were able to make it. We're going through the, or I by myself, I'm going through the preterite tense. And all we've talked about so far, just what the endings are. I saw you come in, but I didn't see exactly when you came in. Do you have any questions so far, Grant?
No, I just came in just a few seconds ago. No, I don't have any questions yet.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll just keep on going. If you've got a question, you can use your raise your hand thingy, or you can just interrupt me, and we'll stop and see what we've got. So basically, your stem changing verbs that stem changed in the present tense will not stem change in the preterite if it's an AR or an ER verb. Obviously, that leaves one group of verbs, which were your IR verbs, and you actually won't happens to those until chapter 8, till lesson 8. So you've got some time where we'll try and avoid those stem changing verbs in the preterite. So the next thing that we have is just one of the multiple choice questions. If you'll take a second, if you're at home or Grant while you're here, and just answer this question and hit submit, and it'll show you the correct answer. And then we'll move on.
Okay.
Okay, and let me just, okay, I just like to see the answer. Hang on, but okay, let me go back to here. All right, we're set then. So at home, be sure, if you're watching the archive, that you answer the questions so you can get the credit for having been at this session. Okay, so this one is talking about some of the things that are irregular. Most verbs really are regular, but it seems like we hyper-focus on all the ones that are irregular, and that's just so you can know what to do with them. Your endings, again, for the preterite tense, remember, were for the AR verbs, they were a, aste, o, amos, and aron for the AR verbs. And for the ER and IR verbs, you had iste, io, imos, and ieron. Now, that is still going to be true from here on out as we look at some of the things that are irregular. The first thing that we're going to look at are some verbs that we call the car, gar, and zar verbs. They have a spelling change in the yo form, in the preterite. And what they do, basically the C will change to QU, the G will change to GU, and the Z changes to C. And then you will add your regular first person singular ending for an AR verb. Remember, it was A. So instead of saying yo, I guess it would be busé if you didn't change this C to QU. It's busqué, yo llegué, yo empecé. And the reason why it has to do with spelling and pronunciation. If, like, for example, with the verb llegar, if it were just L-Y-A-H-A without the U-E, G and E together make like an H sound, so it'd be almost like ye-hey, and we want it to be ye-gay, because the other forms, as it says here in the second bullet, all the other forms of the verb are going to follow the rules. There's nothing irregular about them. So it would be like for the verb llegar, it'd be yo llegué, tú llegaste, él llegó, nosotros llegamos, ellos llegaron. And if you hear that g sound in all the other forms, you want to have that that similarity. So the yo form is llegué. And to get that sound, you have to change the G to GU. Similarly, with changing the C to QU, if you had CE, it would make an S sound, and you want to keep the K sound. So the yo form is busqué, the to form would be buscaste, buscó, buscamos, buscaron. Similarly, with the Z changing to C, this one isn't really a huge deal as far as the sound. It just has to do with the rules, the spelling rules, basically. If you'll remember, like when you learn the word lapis in Spanish 1, like the very first chapter you learned, and if you want to make it plural, it changes to lapices with a Z, with a C, the Z changed to C. This is sort of paying respect to that again if you learn that in Spanish 1. So the yo form would be empecé, then empezaste, empezó, empezamos, empezaron. So this is just a little spelling change that happens with verbs that either end in car, gar, or zar. And the CAR verbs, the C changes from C to QU only in the yo form. The G changes to GU, and the Z changes to C. All other forms follow the rules. Does that make sense to you, Grant?
Oh, yeah, makes good sense.
Okay. All right, let's move on and see what we've got. Okay, this next slide is talking about some other verbs that are irregular. Your book right now is only going to make you responsible for creer, leer, and oír. And just in case you don't know what those verbs mean, creer means to believe, leer means to read, and oír means to hear or to listen. And they have spelling changes in the preterite. What I want you to know, definitely know these three verbs, but the thing that these three verbs have in common and that you'll see happen with other verbs as well is that they're either ER or IR verbs, and they have a vowel before that ER or the IR. Like here you've got EER, with creer you've got EER, with OER you have OIR, and something special is happening here because there's sort of this unwritten rule in Spanish that you typically will not have three vowels right together in a row. Now, as soon as I say that, you can probably come up with some examples where you do, and there are examples where you do, but something special is happening there. And to avoid having three vowels right together in a row, what you have to do with these kinds of verbs is in the third person singular and the third person plural, which is your usted, él, ella, and the ustedes, ellos, ellas forms, what you have to do is change the I to Y in the ending. So like if you look at the verb creer right here, you've got creí, creíste. If you didn't know what the rule was, you would have put CREIO, and that would give you EIO, three vowels right together in a row, which we're trying to avoid unless it's part of a diphthong and the word will be accented. And here that's not what we're working with. So we change the I to Y, and that's sort of a way to get around having three vowels in a row. Sometimes if you can understand why something's irregular, what the thinking is behind it, it's easier for you to remember it and stop and catch yourself if you start to have a problem with it. So it'd be creí, creíste, creyó, creímos, creyeron. And here again in the third person plural, the ustedes, ellos, ellas form, that I is changing to a Y right here. In the regular preterite, it would be IERON, but we're changing that I to Y to avoid having the three vowels right together. Same thing with leer and oír. The other thing I want to point out to you is that all the forms have accent marks for these special verbs right here, which you haven't had in the past. The yo form and the third person singular forms did, but the to form has never carried an accent mark. But on these verbs, they are. So be sure you don't think it's a typo or just some ink dropped on the page. Those are accent marks that are supposed to be there. So for the verb leer, just to go through this, if you want to repeat after me at home, it'd be leí, leíste, leyó with the Y rather than the I, leímos, and then leyeron. For the verb oír, you've got oí, oíste, oyó, oímos, oyeron. All right, and the whole reasoning behind this is to avoid having the three vowels right together in a row. And I hope that makes sense. It's something you just kind of have to memorize and practice a lot so that you will remember it. Grant, do you have any questions with these right here?
No, I didn't exactly know that rule, so that helps me to remember you can't have 3 vowels in a row. So.
Yeah, you'll see, especially when we get to the imperfect tense, you actually can have 3 vowels in a row, but it's very rare, and it's not ever E's and I's together like that. So we'll see later, but for now, if you'll take it as that, it'll help it make sense. One other verb that we're going to look at that is it's actually regular, but none of the forms have an accent. You've got the verb ver, and ver means to see. And if you take off the ER, you would have the V there. So you've got vi, viste, vio, vimos, and vieron. And so technically it kind of is following the rules because your endings were iste, io, imos, ieron, but you're not having an accent mark on any of them. That's all that's happening there. Okay, so that's the verb there. And what we're going to look at next are some of the vocabulary words that help you know that you're working with the past tense, some of the words that will indicate that we're dealing with the past. Okay, so this vocabulary, when you see these words, you'll know something about the preterite is probably coming up because it's talking about the past. So repitan, por favor, from home. Let's see, we've got anoche, anteayer, ayer, de repente, desde, hasta, pasado or pasada, el año pasado, la semana pasada, una vez, dos veces, ya. All these words are pretty self-explanatory. One that I do want to talk about is pasado and pasada up here at the top of the second column. It says it's an adjective. And remember, just adjectives described nouns. And you can tell by the O and the A there that you're going to have to make it match up in gender. And then the two examples that are here, el año pasado, the word año, year, is masculine, so you're going with pasado with an O. And the next example, la semana pasada, semana is feminine, so you got to go with the feminine form of last. Grant, do you know the word for semester, like if we wanted to say last semester?
El semestre pasado.
Right. The word is el semestre for the semester, and then to make it last semester, you'd say el semestre pasado with an O, right? If you wanted to say the last class, the word class is feminine, so you'd say la clase pasada. So you can put in any item as your noun. Just make sure that you make pasado or pasada work with it to mean last. You can, if you want to say 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, veces 1 time, dos veces is 2 times. You just add your number there. 3 veces, 4 veces, 5 veces, 6 veces. You can do any number you want to do there. 100 times if you're into exaggerating, 100 veces. And then the other words that are here I think are pretty much, they are what they are. There's nothing too tricky about them. Grant, do you have any questions with these vocab words?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Let's see. The last thing that I want us to look at is this verb called acabar. And acabar is a really common word that means you just did something. Acabar de, and then a verb in the infinitive means that something just happened. So you're seeing some examples here in the present tense. Acabo de comprar una falda. I just bought a skirt. Acabas de ir de compras. You just went shopping. And for a lot of people, these translations sound like something in the past tense. Like if you just saw in English, you just went shopping. Went sounds like it's in the past tense. However, you'll notice that in the construction here, acabas de ir de compras, you're not seeing anything in the present, in the preterite tense. And I just want you to be familiar with the construction acabar de plus the infinitive. You can put any verb here. Like if you want to say, I just ate, acabo de comer. If you wanted to say, he just ate, instead of putting the O on it for the present tense yo form, you'd put the A for he just ate, acaba de comer. And this is not to be confused with the preterite tense. It's just another form of expressing yourself. Grant, have you ever used or heard people use acabar de?
Yes, I have. I use it quite often, but can you use it as well in the past tense? Not to throw you off or throw the class off, but can it be used? Can you say acabe? Like if you're telling a story that's in the past, can you say, I just bought a skirt, for example, like your example there?
Yeah, you definitely can. And you would just conjugate. It's a regular verb and conjugate it with the a, aste, o, amos, aron. And people will use it both in the preterite and in the infinitive, just like, not the infinitive, the imperfect. I'm sorry, they're both I words. When they're telling a story about something that happened in the past, you'll definitely use it. But a lot of people have seen this, and you'll see it like in the video clips, the fotonovela clips. People will be using it. And in English, the translation sounds like it's in the past tense, but you're actually conjugating it in the present to get that idea across of just having done something. But you can also use it in the preterite and in the imperfect. Okay, what we're going to do now, the last slide here is just the inténtalo practice that was on page, let's see, I don't have my book open, I have it. 206 is where this all started, I'm not sure. Hang on just a second. Yeah, 207 is where the inténtalo practice is. And we can look at these if you guys want. Actually, these are a little bit different from the ones that are in your book, I think. Because in my book, who knows, I think we all have the same edition, but it had comer, salir, comenzar, and leer. So just a couple of these are different. We can do a little bit of practice if you want, or Grant, you're the only representative here in the work that you've done with the preterite off the in Linea site or out of your book. Are there any of those that you have questions with about how they got the answers that they had?
No, ma'am, I don't have any.
Okay, no problem. And basically with these, if you follow the rules, they will make sense, but it takes a lot of practice, the repetition over and over and over again to understand how these work. Grant, just for the benefit of everyone at home, let's do this set with, let's do one that's not in your book. Hang on, let me cross-reference here. Comer and salir are both there, comenzar. And instead of leer, this slide has celebrar. So let's do that one first. And what we're trying to do here is the verbs in the preterite tense. So the verb would be celebrar, and we'll do it for these 5 subjects that are here. Grant, you want to try the first one?
Sure. Elena celebró.
Celebró, and it would be, it takes me forever with this text tool, but I'm exaggerating. It doesn't take that long. Celebró, and you would have to put your accent mark over the O. Elena celebró. What about número 2, Grant?
Yo celebré.
Muy bien. Oh, I missed my B. Hang on. Celebré, and then you would have your accent mark over the A. What about número 3?
Los chicos celebraron.
Muy bien. Celebraron. Okay, and then número 4.
Emilio y yo celebramos.
Celebramos. Sí. ¿Y número 5?
¿Tú celebraste?
Muy bien. And then celebraste. Okay, so that's how those work. And all we're doing is taking the endings from the AR verbs that you can find on 206 or I think it was on the second slide that we went through here. And you remember, if you remember, they're a, aste, o, amos, aron. And the two that have accent marks that you're going to want to remember are the third person singular with the O with the accent mark over it, and the first person singular A with an accent mark over it. All right, and the rest of these are in your book, and you have probably already done the intentolo exercises, and we'll leave it at that. One thing I do want to mention, we do have a lot of people in the class, not a lot, but we have several people that are either native Spanish speakers or who have had a lot of Spanish before. One of the things that's different between written Spanish and spoken Spanish in the preterite tense, lots of people will pronounce the tu form in the preterite with an S on the end of it. They would say, tu celebrastes. If someone was asking you, hey, did you eat already, like in number 2 over here with comer, they would say comistes. And you'll notice that when it's written, the S isn't there. And that's just something in music. When you hear different artists singing, they'll say, me amastes, and they're not doing something special with the vosotros form or anything. They're just, in spoken Spanish, a lot of times you'll hear that S added, but when it's written, you're not supposed to add it. But some people who don't necessarily have academic training in Spanish may actually put it when they write it, but just know that it's not supposed to be there when it's written, and you're not committing a great error when you say it, but the correct way is without it. And actually, when I speak, just so you know, in my real life, when I speak Spanish, I do put the S on it, and everyone that I'm around tends to put the S on it, so it's nothing terribly wrong, but just know that in written Spanish and definitely like in professional type Spanish, you wouldn't probably put the S on it, but it happens. Everybody uses it. Grant, had you ever heard it with the S on the tu form in the preterite?
Not really. What countries is more apt to say it that way?
Definitely the Latin American countries. In Spain, I don't think people do it at all. But like at Mexico and Central America, for sure. Friends I have from Argentina and Colombia both do. I think it's something throughout Latin America that people do, just because in the present tense, the tu form has the S on it, like o, as, almorzan, and it's just a carrying over of that. And if you look at, I don't know if people still buy music on CDs or not. I buy everything off of, buy the MP3s of it and download it. But when you could look at the lyrics of a song, it would actually be written with the S on it, like te fuistes, no me llamastes. It would actually have the S on it. And I remember when I was learning Spanish, music really helped me learn Spanish a lot. And I always wondered why that was, and I had to point that out to my teachers, and they explained to me that it's something that's done in spoken Spanish but not in written Spanish.
I understand. I might have not just paid attention to it. I have friends, too, from those countries that you're talking about. I lived in Mexico for 2 years. It could be something I just haven't paid attention to. I don't personally pronounce it that way, so it has rubbed off on me.
Yeah, and I ended up pronouncing it that way because I didn't really know written Spanish well enough. I learned it from just speaking with people when I was first learning Spanish, and then I went back and studied it all and realized, oh, maybe we're not supposed to do that. But that's just one of the interesting things. I knew you had been in a Spanish-speaking country for some time, and just wondered if you had noticed it. So we'll leave it at that. And any of you that are at home working on this, if you have questions with any of the other examples from the practic exercises on pages 208 and 209 or that are on the Enlinea site, please don't hesitate to email me the question saying, hey, I don't understand number 7 on exercise 2 or whatever the deal may be. I'll be happy to help you with it. If you guys are set with the preterite, we'll go ahead and look at the demonstrative adjectives and pronouns. Let me get this to pull up real quick. Okay, and this is the information on the demonstrative adjectives and pronouns that is in your book on page 210 and 211. And basically, students tend to make a big deal out of this. I'm not sure why. I think it's just that if you don't study it well or you don't understand it well, it can seem confusing because the words seem an awful lot alike.
It says that you're talking, but I'm not getting anything. Are you still there?
Grant, are you still here?
I am. I can hear you now.
Okay, Verizon dropped me. I have on my laptop. I have the smart card, and I mean I'm not moving or anything. I'm sitting in my office, but sometimes for whatever reason a cloud goes over or something, and it dropped me, and I was trying to reconnect, and of course it takes forever. I apologize for the pause in the session. That is so frustrating, but hey, we're working with technology here. What can we do? Let me get this pulled back up again. Make sure we're all set. Yeah, there we go. But anyway, demonstrative adjectives are used to point specific things out. For example, esta camisa means this shirt. Ese vendedor means, that salesman. Aquellos zapatos are those shoes. And it says in parentheses over there, it's implying something about distance. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. On this next slide, we'll talk about what the actual demonstrative adjectives are. And adjectives, of course, have to agree in gender and number. So that's why for each of these words, you have like 4 different ways to say it. That's what's happening here. So to say this or these, and that's somehow implying something that's really close to you. The words are este or esta for this, and estos or estas for these. Now, these words can get really confusing if you don't make a concerted effort to memorize them because they look and sound an awful lot like these words right here that mean that. And ese and esa are your ways to say that, and esos and esas are the ways to say those. And that somehow is implying something that's a little bit farther away, but maybe close to the person who's listening to you. The words aquel and aquella both mean that, and aquellos and aquellas mean those. And there's some sort of implication that they are further away from either of the other two. And we'll talk about all that in just a second. But if you want to repeat after me from home with how to pronounce these words, you've got este, esta, estos, estas, and these all mean this or these. Then you've got ese, esa, esos, esas, and those mean that or those. And then your words aquel, aquella, aquellos, and aquellas both mean that or those over there, further away. And the big difference between the ese and esa and aquel and aquella has to do with implied distance, because if you look, they both mean that and they both mean those, but the aquel ones tend to mean something further away. And we're going to look at that right now in just a second. I've got a question for you guys to answer if you'll take a minute and answer this one. If you're at home, please answer it. That's how you're getting credit for attending the archive. It says, how would you say this book in Spanish? And you can choose either A, B, or C, and then click submit, and you'll see what the correct answer is. Then we'll move on and talk about the differences. Okay, Grant, and I got your answer already, and you have the correct answer. And let's see. Okay, let me pull up this next one. Okay, and this is basically another way of saying what we were just talking about, the differences between the demonstrative adjectives. The second bullet right here is what we're talking about. To determine which one to use, you must establish the relationship between the speaker and the noun being pointed out. And what they mean by that is basically your distance between you or whoever's speaking and the item that you're talking about. So if it's really close to you, you'd say this. If it's kind of far away from you, you'd say that. If it's really far away, aquel. And so this, with the this and these, you've got este, esta, estos, and estas are used to point out nouns that are close to the speaker and the listener. And then ese, esa, esos, and esas, the ones that mean that or those, are used to point out nouns that are not close to the speaker. They may be close to the listener. So like if Grant and I were in a store and he's over by the shoe display and I'm sitting in the chair, I've been trying on shoes, and I tell him, bring me that shoe, and he picks one up and says, this one, and I say, no, that one. He's really close to it, but I'm not, but it's evidently a different shoe besides the one he has in his hand. As you just do some examples and listen to conversations using this, it'll make more sense for you. The demonstrative adjectives aquel, aquella, aquellos, and aquellas are used to point out nouns that are far away from the speaker and the listener. So it's not something that either one of us could just put our hand on and select as another option. It would have to be, you'd have to walk across the room or something to pick up the one that I want that's over there. And that's the difference between the three demonstrative adjectives. Do you have any questions with the demonstrative adjectives at all, Grant?
No, I'm sure you're going to cover it, and I think I have a firmer understanding of it now, the difference between the demonstrative pronouns and the adjectives concerning the accent marks, but I got confused, and I think I got it all figured out.
Okay, and that is what we're going to go over next. The pronouns are the exact same words, but they have an accent mark over them. So we're going to talk about just that simple difference. Is the difference between the adjective and the pronoun is just that the pronoun has an accent mark, and it stands on its own because a pronoun is a word that replaces a noun. And if you look at some of these examples, you'll see what I'm talking about. For example, it says, ¿Quieres comprar este suéter? Do you want to buy this sweater? And then the person says, no, I don't want this one, I want that one. And they're not mentioning the word sweater anymore. So if you're not going to use the word sweater anymore, you have to use a pronoun to replace it. And remember, the demonstrative pronouns are going to carry an accent mark. So the person says, hey, no, I don't want this one, I want that one. And the este and the ese in this example here both have accent marks over them because we're no longer using the word sweater, but we know that they're talking about not this sweater, but that sweater. but they're now pronouns rather than adjectives. And the way you know they're pronouns is they have an accent mark. All right. The second, these last two here go together as an example. Vas a leer estas revistas? Are you going to read these magazines? And the person says, yeah, I'm going to read these. And I'm also going to read those, over there that must be kind of far away. And you'll notice that the estas for these and the aquellas for those both carry accent marks. And you don't see the word revistas anywhere in this person's answer. And that's because the pronoun estas and aquellas is replacing the word revistas. And just visually, the way you know that you're working with a pronoun rather than the adjective is the accent mark. As far as the pronunciation goes, there really isn't a huge difference in the way it sounds. And I think that's what can be confusing to students because they are, or they appear to be, exactly the same word. So let's look at, let me just make sure I have the right place. I don't want to skip over a question real quick. Yeah, okay. Let's look and we'll see what those pronouns are. The pronouns are exactly the same as the words we saw on that second slide that were the adjectives, okay, except these guys have accent marks. So you've got este and esta, estos, estas, ese, esa, esos, esas, aquel, aquella, aquellos, aquellas, and they mean the same things as the adjectives did, either this and these, that and those, and then the aquel and aquella, these guys meant that and those, but it was somehow implied that it was further away over there. So the meaning is the same, but just by the very nature of what a pronoun is and what a pronoun does, you will only see this word. For example, if we're talking about this book, instead of saying este libro, and we want to say, I want this one, you would say este with the accent mark over it. And then you don't have to use the word libro at all. And I hope that makes sense. And in practice, you've just got to remember that the pronouns carry accent marks. And a pronoun, just by its very definition, means it's replacing the noun. Okay? And the adjective, on the other hand, will be accompanied by the noun. Okay? Does that make sense, Grant?
It does. That's the way I had to finally say it to myself, was I had to realize one was replacing the noun. The noun wasn't there, therefore having the accent.
Right.
And the other one was.
Yeah, and that's exactly, just by definition, a pronoun replaces a noun, and by definition, an adjective modifies a noun, which means the noun actually has to be there. So the adjectives will have the noun, the noun disappears, and to distinguish between an adjective and a pronoun, you'll actually have an accent mark over the pronouns. And that's the big thing that's different between the two. And hopefully that will make sense. And maybe when you go through and do some of the practice exercises, those of you that are at home, you'll see the difference between the two. And I think I have a question set here for this next one. And let's see. Let me get it to pull up. It says, what is the only difference between a demonstrative adjective and a demonstrative pronoun? And you can fill in whatever you want as your answer and hit submit, and then it will let you know what the answer was that I was looking for. Right, and Grant, you have the right answer, and I'm sure you saw that when you hit submit. So those of you that are at home, just remember that what is the only difference between a demonstrative adjective and a demonstrative pronoun. Go ahead and fill your answer in and click submit, and then you'll see what the correct answer was. All right, so let's move on. Let's see, there we go. With the idea of neuter. We haven't really had that idea very much in Spanish. Like there's not really a word for it that we've been using. With your demonstrative pronouns, though, there's 3 of them that don't change number or gender, and they're the words esto, eso, and aquello. And basically, these are referring to nouns, situations, ideas, concepts that are unidentified or unspecified. And that really doesn't, I mean, just to me, even as the professor, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But what that means is, like in English, if someone says something to you like, that's right, or right on, or that's the idea, they're talking about, an idea that you've expressed that they agree with, or attitude that you have that they agree with or they don't agree with, or it's something that's not specific. And there wouldn't necessarily be a noun that you could put there with it if they were adjectives. Grant was saying eso es, and that's saying like that's it. And remember that, I can't even remember what it was called, but the way to learn to speak Spanish, SOCKS, remember that one? But anyway, esto, eso, and aquello refer to ideas that aren't specific. And so, for example, ¿qué es esto? What's this? And that would be used not because, like, you pick up a toy off the floor and pick it up and say, what is this? Because you're referring to a toy if you do that. But say the parents come home after a weekend away and the house is trashed. Their teenage children have evidently had a party while they're gone. And they're like, what is this? And they're referring to the mess. They're referring to the kids sleeping on the couch. They're referring to the refrigerator that has no more food in it. They're referring to all the dirty dishes, like the whole concept. Eso es ser interesante. That's interesting. Aquello es bonito. That's pretty. Are just referring to ideas in general that aren't necessarily specific. Okay? And that's what's happening with those 3 adjectives. And this last slide, let me pull it up real quick. Wimba is going really slow for me today. And I got an email. They're going to be updating switching the server that Wimba's on, so things should go faster. Friday night and early Saturday morning, they're going to be switching it, so it should be faster, hopefully. Basically, your demonstrative adjectives and your demonstrative pronouns have to agree in gender and number with the corresponding noun. So, for example, este libro es de Pablito, estos son de Juana, estos must be referring to perhaps the books, right? This book is Pablito's, those books, or these books are Juana's. And they just have to agree in gender and number, and we'd already been talking about that. And then the last here is just the inténtalo information from page 211. This one actually has a couple more examples than the one in your book does. Either way, it's the same information that's there. Basically what they're wanting us to do here is like la falda and este. We would need to choose the correct form of the adjective este to make it work with la falda, and that would be esta falda, estos estudiantes, etc. Grant, did you have any questions about the demonstrative adjectives or pronouns while we're here?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And I guess your answer will probably be no, too, but let me just ask so I can know I did. Do you have any questions about anything that we're working on or that's coming up in the future?
No, I don't know if you want to put it on the archives or not, but I'm just curious myself what the difference between imperfect tense and preterite tense is, and you might have already explained it in the first 2 minutes I was late.
No, the only thing that we talked about was just the preterite is for all they're telling you now in the book is that it's just to describe completed past actions, and then the imperfect, you're going to find out later what it's about. But I can just tell you the imperfect is the mood that's used to describe things that happened in the past as well, which means they're done and over. But it's something that was done repetitiously or habitually. Like if you were to say, every Sunday I went to my grandma's house, or every summer I was on the swim team, to express that idea in the past, because it was repetitious, it was something that was continuing and ongoing, but it was in the past, you would use the imperfect. Other times that you use the imperfect is to talk about the weather, the time of day, what people look like, how people act, how people felt. Anything that was ongoing for any amount of time, you'll use the imperfect. And let me check in the table of contents real quick when you guys get into the imperfect. I think it may just be, I don't know if it's lesson 9. Hang on a second. I want to get to the table of contents for your section. Yeah, it's not till lesson 10 that you see the imperfect, and then you're going to have to start comparing the preterite and the perfect in 10.2. So we're going to get to it, but it's not something you're going to be focusing on all semester long. So you'll catch the endings in on page 342, and then you'll start trying to compare the differences between the preterite and the perfect on page 346. And basically it has to do with when and how the action in the past was occurring. And for now, they just want to sum it up for you and say a completed past action, use the preterite. So between now and lesson 10, you're not going to be expected to use the imperfect or to distinguish between the preterite and perfect. But you can't help but be curious when you know there's something else out there.
Well, I fall into that class too, where I've learned Spanish by some others, and I haven't had the academic Spanish taught to me, so I can't explain some of what I know. So that makes me further curious.
Yeah. Feel free to jump ahead to lesson 10 just to check out and see. And that's how I learned Spanish too. I had actually had a couple years of it in high school, but as all of you in your discussion board postings say, you had it, but you didn't necessarily learn a whole lot. I made an A in the classes, and I loved it, and I learned as much as I could, but you can only learn so much in a high school Spanish classroom setting. And it was when I went to Mexico and lived with a family that didn't speak any English at all that I had to learn it. And I learned an awful lot of spoken Spanish, but I really didn't know how to write it at all. And then when I went in college, studying Spanish and then getting my master's degree in Spanish, I learned, that's why I've always done it this way, or that's why you say it this way. I knew how to speak it really well, but I really did not know how to write it. And it's interesting to see the differences, but we're in the same boat there, Grant. But it's ahead in lesson 10 if you want to jump ahead and take a peek.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And if you don't have any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the archive, and let me get this stopped.